want to begin this morning with two questions. First question, do you believe, not know, but do you believe that God is sovereign? Let me ask you this again. Does everybody here believe that God is sovereign? Sovereign, yes. God is sovereign. And that's going to make what we're going to be talking about these next few weeks a little more incredible, because sovereign means God can do what he wants to do, whether I give him permission or not. How about that? We're doing a story over the next 4 weeks, the story of a man in the Old Testament named Jacob, and that's what we're going to talk about today. Brand new series called Blessed. And I think it's going to be a very interesting study for all of us. It has stretched me incredibly just preparing. And I hope that as you're hearing what's coming out of my mouth will stretch you as well. Because what's coming out of my mouth is not mine, but God's. I don't think anybody sitting here this morning would argue that God is all powerful. I don't think you could argue that he uses all kinds of circumstances, situations, scenarios, whatever, to bring his purpose about. I think we'd all agree with that, right? I think about a guy named Joseph in the Old Testament. This guy, Joseph, spent 12 years being falsely accused, sitting in prison, while God all the time was getting him ready to be in the right place at the right time. There's a couple ladies in the Bible in the Old Testament I like to talk about. Esther and Rahab. They were both liars. Did you know that? We don't talk about them that way, but Esther was lying about who she was to save her own life. And then God used her to be in the right place at the right time to save all the Jewish people. Rahab. Oh, there's one for you. Rahab was a prostitute. She hid some spies and she lied about where they were right before the walls of Jericho came down and the nation of Israel took over the promised land. But Rahab's lying saved her life, the life of her family. But listen to this. Not only did it save her life, guess whose lineage? How do I want to say this? Guess who came down her line? Jesus. Jesus. Think about that. A lying prostitute is in the lineage of Jesus. Folks, listen, I can give story after story after story showing us how God uses all kinds of situations, scenarios to achieve his purposes. And sometimes those scenarios are in spite of us. That's the reason for the title of the message this morning. In spite of. God does things in spite and through our sin. See, these stories show how God is working his purposes even though we are in the midst many times of sinful acts. Listen, it's not that God condones our sin. Let me repeat that. It is not that God condones our sin. But even in our rebellion, even in our self-interest, even in our rebellion, we can be redeemed and used by God to complete his purposes and blessing in our life. We're calling this series Blessed. And when I say that word, I just want you to envision. Well, no, you don't have to. Because as soon as I say the word, you have this picture that comes to your mind what blessed is. Right? I just drove up out front in my Cadillac. Right? My bank account has 7 figures in it. That's what we think of when we think in terms of blessed. But I'm going to stretch our minds over this series about the idea of what being blessed is. But I'm also going to stretch our minds about who the God is that we truly serve. Because you see, we're going to be talking about a guy named Jacob. Jacob was blessed by God, blessed his family in spite of everything in our minds, listen, it should have disqualified him. There's no reason that God should have ever blessed this guy. Here's the underlying statement that we need to understand today. God doesn't bless me because I deserve it. God doesn't bless me because I deserve it. You see, in our lives, in the way we grow up and the things around us, the better we are, the better people treat us typically. And so we get blessed by those because we're doing what they want us to do. God doesn't care. It's not about what you do. God doesn't bless us because we deserve it. And we're going to see through this story of Jacob how much God loves, blesses, and has huge plans for a guy who is known for being a con artist. He's coming from a very dysfunctional family. Brother wants to kill him, where his dad doesn't really love him all that much, and his mom sends him away. But as crazy as all that sounds, God is going to show up one night and let Jacob know that his life is so blessed that he can't conceive of how big this blessing is going to be. If you have spent much time in the Bible, you've been in church very often, what we're going to read this morning is not going to feel right to you. After you hear it, there's going to be something that just bothers you about God. It's been bothering me for some time. As a matter of fact, every time I tried to type out what I wanted to say today, I couldn't get the words right. Because everything about today's story just feels wrong. But I hope after we're done, we'll find the beauty in what God's doing. And we will have figured out that God doesn't bless us because we deserve it. Before I read our story, I want us to define what I mean by blessing. We're going to hear it. We're going to use it a lot over the next several weeks. And what are we talking about when we say blessing? Blessing is God's good fortune. That means the breaks seem to go your way. It's God's strength, and that's God's compensation for your weaknesses. And God's presence, feeling that God's right beside you. The first thing that doesn't feel right to me is when we start to read this story, we discover that not everyone gets blessed. Does that feel right to you? God doesn't bless everyone. There are some people who are, and there's some who aren't. See, blessing's not just about that good job or more money, because those things are under God's control as well. But you can have that and not have God's presence in your life. And that's where the blessing is. Truly being blessed is when you have the perfect storm of God's good fortune, strength, and presence in your life. It doesn't mean that everything will always go your way. But overall, the result of your life will include those three scenarios. We're going to be in Genesis chapter 27, if you want to turn to that and hold it. I want to read something from Genesis 25 before I get to 27, though. There's this man named Isaac. Isaac had a wife. Her name was Rebekah. They wanted to have kids, but they couldn't. So they prayed to God to allow them to have kids. And God said, okay, you can have kids. She conceived twins. And while Rebekah is pregnant, she can feel these babies wrestling inside of her. And she asks God, why is it happening? And God shows up in verse 23 of chapter 25. And he says, the Lord said to her, 2 nations are in your womb, and 2 peoples from within you will be separated. One people will be stronger than the other. The older will serve the younger. So before Jacob's even born, before Esau is born, Rebekah has never seen her children yet. God reveals his plan that the older is going to serve the younger. What God's telling her is her younger child is going to be the one that gets blessed. Jump over to chapter 27 with me. There's a little bit of time gone by. The oldest is Esau. The youngest is Jacob. They've grown up. Their father Isaac is going blind, and they believe that he's on his deathbed. And so we later find out, though, he lived another 40 years. But at this time, they think he's going to die. So one day he's lying in bed, and he calls for Esau, and he tells him to go out and to kill something and prepare some food for him to eat so that he can bless him. Rebekah overhears this conversation. She goes and tells Jacob what he needs to do. Beginning in verse 6 of chapter 27. She said to her son Jacob, "Listen, I overheard your father say to Esau, 'Bring me some wild game and prepare me a delicious meal. Then I will bless you in the Lord's presence before I die. Now, my son, listen to me. Do exactly as I tell you. Go out to the flocks and bring me 2 fine young goats. I'll use them to prepare your father's favorite dish. Then take the food to your father so he can eat it and bless you before he dies.' But look," Jacob replied to Rebekah, "my brother Esau is a hairy man, and my skin is smooth. What if my father touches me? He'll see that I'm trying to trick him, and then he'll curse me instead of bless me." But his mother replied, "Then let the curse fall on me, my son. Just do what I tell you. Go out and get the goats for me." So Jacob went out, and he got the young goats for his mother. Rebekah took them and prepared a delicious meal just the way Isaac liked it. Then she took Esau's favorite clothes, which were there in the house, and gave them to her younger son, Jacob. She covered his arms with his arms and the smooth part of his neck with the skin of young goats. Then she gave Jacob the delicious meal, including freshly baked bread. So Jacob took the food to his father. "My father," he said. "Yes, my son," Isaac answered. "Who are you, Esau or Jacob?" Jacob replied, "It's Esau, your firstborn son. I've done as you told me. Here's the wild game. Now sit up and eat so you can give me your blessing." Isaac asked, "How did you find it so quickly, my son?" "The Lord your God put it in my path," Jacob replied. Then Isaac said to Jacob, "Come closer so I can touch you and make sure that you are really Esau." And so Jacob went closer to his father, and Isaac touched him. And the voice is Jacob's, but the hands are Esau's, Isaac said. But he did not recognize Jacob because Jacob's hand felt hairy just like Esau's. So Isaac prepared to bless Jacob. "But are you really my son Esau?" he asked. "Yes, I am," Jacob replied. Then Isaac said, "Now, my son, bring me the wild game. Let me eat it. Then I will give you my blessing." So Jacob took the food to his father, and Isaac ate it. I lost my place. Pick it up in 27. So Jacob went over and kissed him. And Isaac caught the smell of his clothes. He was finally convinced, and he blessed his son. He said, "The smell of my son is the richness of the earth. May God always give you abundant harvest of grain, bountiful new wine. May many nations become your servants, and may they bow down to you. May you be the master of your own brothers, and may your mother's sons bow down to you. All who curse you will be cursed, and all who bless you will be blessed." Sounds like something from a soap opera, doesn't it? I mean, it's crazy. But the thing to notice here, it did not begin with Jacob. It began with Rebekah. And because Jacob was her favorite son, and he wanted to please her, he just did what she said. But this is going to affect the rest of his life. Jacob leaves the room. And just a few minutes after he's out of the room, Esau shows up with the food that he had fixed for his dad. But when he found out what had happened, he just started to scream. He begs his dad to bless him, but Isaac tells him that he can't do it because he'd already blessed Jacob. And he said that Esau was going to serve Jacob. So at this point, Esau is so angry. He's so angry he wants to kill Jacob. And when Rebekah finds this out, she sends Jacob away so that Esau can't get to him. I just find this amazing. You have a family that's in pieces, right? There is deception in the family. There's a desire to kill each other. Does this seem like a family that needs to be blessed by God? Let's be honest. Is this a family that you think needs to be blessed by God? No. That's why I say it doesn't feel right. This is not a family that needs blessed by God. It's crazy. But this is exactly what God said it was going to happen. God was bringing his plan to fruition. And he was doing it through lies and deception and a dysfunctional family. Well, that's the end of the story for today, so I'll keep you on your edge of your seats. Jacob's conned his dying father. He's ticked off his brother because Esau now wants to kill him. And he's running for his life. And probably the saddest thing of all of this to me is the fact that Jacob never gets to see his mother again because she dies before he gets home. But yet, God tells us Jacob is blessed. So when we look at this story, what do we see here? Let me, just real quick. God has a plan. Do we understand that? God has a plan. Here's the part that we lose sometimes is that we are part of that plan. We are involved in that plan. And even though you may be a lying, cheating, addicted screw up, that's me. I just use the adjective to describe me. God still wants to bless us. It's still his desire to bless us. And he wants to bless us beyond what we can imagine. But there's a catch. He only wants to bless us as long as we are using our heart to seek him. Seeking him first. Jeremiah 29:13 says, "You will seek me and find me when you seek me with all your heart." God doesn't bless us because we deserve it. Maybe you're sitting there thinking, maybe I'm Esau. Maybe God's not going to bless me. What happens then? That's a valid question. But I'm going to tell you, if you want God's blessing, you need to seek God. That's where it begins. We seek God to receive the blessing. Here's a thought that I was wrestling with the whole time I'm writing. God blesses me in spite of my moral failures as long as I have a deep desire for him and his blessing. Think about that for a moment. God desires to bless me, but it's only if I seek him with all of my heart. He tells us that over and over. And so when I thought about this, I began to think of some of the stories. I love the stories in the Old Testament. And I began to think of some of those. Abraham slept with a slave because he was tired of waiting on God. Jacob conned his dying father. We just read that. David had an affair with his woman that was taking a bath on the top of her house. And then what did he do? Then he killed her husband. So, think about that. God still blessed them, didn't he? Samson, he pretty much did nothing right morally. Samson was a jerk. Now, he was a really strong jerk, but he was a jerk. It's crazy. He didn't do anything morally right. But yet God gave him his strength back when he asked for it. Or Jonah. Jonah directly disobeyed God. Oh, man. And God let him try again. And he saved a whole city because he prayed, God, give me another chance. You see, time after time, as we read the Old Testament, we find that God kills kings. All right? Whether they're the kings of Israel, the kings of Judah, or kings of other foreign countries, God will kill those kings for stuff much less than what we just read here. Why is that? Because they were seeking to serve other gods. They weren't seeking God. They were willing to worship other gods. They didn't want him. But when you find these guys that we talked about that are desperately wanting to be what God wants them to be, they just screw up. God overlooks the failures, as long as their heart was seeking him. Simple question today. Do you want God's blessing? That's a question. Do you want God's blessing? I want God's blessing. And it begins by seeking him with all my heart. I want God's good fortune. I want God's strength. But most importantly, I want God's presence in my life. And here's the key. He wants to give it to you. But the blessing may not come as you think. God was blessing Jacob. And yet Jacob is now running for his life. So sometimes the blessing we want will not come in the package that we want it in. And we've got to understand that. So over the next few weeks, we're going to see how the blessing that God gives Jacob unfolds in his life. But if you've got things in your life, maybe your marriage isn't what you want it to be. Start praying that God will bless it as you seek him with all your heart. Maybe your kids aren't where you want them to be. Start praying that God will bless them so they will be, but you seek God to make that happen. I really want God to bless my marriage. I really want God to bless my kids and family. We have to start asking for it. We begin to pray every day, God bless my family, bless my kids. You see, the Bible talks about God's blessing. It talks about God's blessing on Jacob's life in a way that he couldn't help but grow more prosperous. It says about Joseph that he was successful. The Lord was with him in everything he did. Boy, I can't think of a greater blessing than that. To have God with me, with everything that I do. Folks, we need to begin to ask God to bless our lives. And we got to believe that he will. But that blessing is prefaced by seeking him with your whole heart. And as you go back over the course of this year, we've talked a lot about discipleship, and that's no different right there. To seek God with your whole heart is the core of discipleship.